Tonight, the president will address the nation to push this wall at the southern border. He is doing it in the middle of this credibility crisis. He and his administration have been repeatedly forced to answer for false information they continue to spread about immigration policy and the border, such as when the president said last week that some former presidents had praised him for his commitment to build a border wall. But all of the 4 living presidents either deny that happened or have publicly opposed the wall. And I want you to watch how the vice president responded.
I know the president has said that that was his impression from previous administrations, previous presidents. I know I've seen clips of previous presidents talking about the importance of border security, the importance of addressing the issue of illegal immigration.
That's different from telling the president, though, right?
But look, honestly, the American people want us to address this issue.
CNN political analyst Carl Bernstein, the Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist who helped break the Watergate story, is here with me. It is so good to have you back.
Be with you.
Just even listening to the vice president struggling there, right, in responding to what the president had said last week, the president up tonight, in the midst of this credibility crisis. What do you think?
His whole presidency is a credibility crisis because he traffics in misinformation, lying, and disinformation. And that is the hallmark of this presidency, and it's increasingly why Republicans, not just Democrats, are losing confidence in the President of the United States and wonder how long this kind of lying can go on to the American people. There's never been anything like this.
He has flirted recently publicly about declaring a national emergency. Do you think he goes there tonight?
I wouldn't predict anything Donald Trump does or doesn't do, but I think we need to identify the real national emergency in this country, and that is the question of whether or not Donald Trump is fit to be the President of the United States. And increasingly, we are hearing from Republicans, Democrats, journalists, citizens, on the basis of real hard information, why it may be that a consensus is developing that Donald Trump is unfit to be President of the United States because of his actions in obstructing justice, because of what we just saw in Syria, because of his ignorance on foreign policy, because of his putting his self-interest and that of his family ahead of the national interest. But above all, the lying. We've never been confronted with this kind of consistent dishonesty. Nixon was a criminal president. We've never been confronted with this kind of consistent dishonesty in terms of the president projecting a public debate that is based from the beginning of his presidency through today. Look, indeed, what he's tried to do, the pretzel he got himself into trying to explain the Russians in Afghanistan with no understanding of the history of his own time and hasn't bothered to do the work. That's one reason that Mattis, Tillerson, and others came to the conclusion that we have a national emergency. The national emergency is not the wall, it's Donald Trump.
How about the pretzel over Syria and John Bolton? We were just talking about, President Erdogan. And can you believe the Secretary of Defense, Jim Mattis, resigned 2 weeks ago? And in any normal news cycle, that would be months of coverage. Bang, Carl. That was a blip.
What the hell happened at Helsinki? We still don't know that.
Right.
We don't know whether and how he became a pawn, half-winning, fully winning of Vladimir Putin, both perhaps at Helsinki and throughout what we saw in the campaign. That's one of the things that Mueller is trying to determine. We don't know a lot about this president and his presidency, but what we do know is that he has not been truthful about almost anything of significance about his presidency. He has tried to feed his base. We have had in this country situations where maybe half the country hates the president of the United States at one time or another. We've never had a president that hates half the country. That really, look at what we're talking about. We're talking about a wall here that is a symbol that says, brown people, we don't want you. Goes back to Trump talking about rapists, goes back to talking about, gangs, and rather than looking at a real immigration problem, which we have had for a long time and need to solve, and border security is one of those questions. It's complicated, and yet again, he's trying to solve it through misinformation, disinformation. Those crossing the border are not the threat to us in terms of national security.
I want to ask you, I was having a conversation at the top of the hour with Dana Bash and Dan Pfeiffer about, of course, taking this president's primetime address, fact-checking, how challenging that is with this president. And how remarkable is it, do you think, that there has even been a debate on whether or not networks want to take this primetime address of the president?
Well, it's an appropriate debate. And incidentally, the debate goes way back. I was bureau chief of ABC News in 1980 when the bureau chiefs in Washington, we all discussed the question of whether or not we should take everything the president does live in terms of announcements and even press conferences, because why not treat it like a news story if we think there is a real possibility it is a propaganda exercise? There are no easy answers as to what to do in this situation. Mm-hmm. But what we do know is that we have an obligation in the press to not give a platform in which misinformation, disinformation, and lying goes unchallenged. And I think the networks have lined themselves up tonight, as have the Democrats for that matter, to deal with whatever comes out of Donald Trump's mouth tonight.